hold the arrow there, I'll let you work this out, and just simply give it a little twist and end up with the cock feather facing upwards, okay? Come across the front of yourself, and then the arrow just simply clips on the string between those two little points. Now, these are called knocking rings. They are integral to good shooting. You don't just put an arrow onto the string. Even Robin Hood himself would have had something telling him where arrow placement went, okay? It's an integral part of shooting, part of tuning your bow in. And the arrow just clips between them, and then it rests on the arrow rest just there. Now, the next thing you're going to do, especially if it's a bow that you're unfamiliar with, is just turn the arrow over and give the bow a little shake. If the arrow was to suddenly just drop off like that, don't shoot the bow. It could be dangerous, okay? At the time of releasing, what can happen is the bow can try to leave the arrow prematurely, a bit too fast, okay? Or before the string's fully gone forward. And you can end up seriously hurting yourself. The arrow can get caught between you and the bow. Not very nice experience. An arrow that fits onto the bow, if you have to pull it off, that's not dangerous, but it probably won't shoot very well, okay? But you're not going to hurt yourself. So you really want something. The old saying is, put an arrow to the bow, turn the arrow upside down. This is if you've got a bow that you're unfamiliar with. Give it a little shake, and the arrow should not drop off. Consequently, if you turn the bow upside down, it shouldn't really take the weight of an arrow as well, okay? And that's going to be pretty good. Those arrows are going to come out, as long as they're the right arrows, they're going to come out pretty good, okay? Arrow rest just there. Put it on your arrow rest just there, okay? So what's called knocking an arrow to the bow. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to point your arm directly at the target you intend to hit. Now, when Dad was being taught to shoot, they would have told Dad to push his arm forward, okay, and just turn the elbow out slightly in that manner, okay? So he's holding the bow more like that, okay? That should be fairly familiar with what you've been taught to do. Now, for target archery, that's a very good arm position to keep your arm in, because generally, almost 90%, target archers, when they draw the bow back, they're going to be down here underneath their chin, okay? And you're going to have those 3 points of contact, you know, across your chin, your lips, nose, and obviously you've got a set of sights mounted to your bow as well. So that's a very good way of shooting a bow. However, not necessarily is that what I want you to do today. You're trying a different style of shooting. This is a bit more bow hunting, so it's a little bit more flexible. What I want you to do is, and this is important, push your arm towards the target, okay? Now, we must avoid that string coming down and bruising your arm. No one wants that, okay? So what you need to be doing there is just relaxing. Instead of pushing your elbow out that way, this is a big difference. See, instead of pushing your elbow out that way, Andrew, what you're actually doing is relaxing it and just pushing your arm forward and then just relaxing the elbow. Allow this elbow to naturally drop back. And as soon as you do that, you'll see that the string will naturally come away from your bracer. So you've got string clearance there. Moreover, and this is the most important thing that I really want to get across to you guys, if you are pushing your elbow forward, okay, and you start to lock this elbow out a little bit too much, what's happening there, at the time of releasing, the energy coming off the bow is going straight into this hand, and it's going to run along your arm, into your elbow, into your shoulder blade, and all the energy is coming straight through your arm, and you're going to find the bow torquing in the hand, and it's quite hard to keep this thing under control. The stabiliser on the front of the bow is trying to dampen that energy down and make it a more stable bow to shoot. That's what the stabiliser does. But nevertheless, you know, if you've got a fairly powerful bow, some of that recoil is going to come through your shoulder there. Now, if you're relaxing your elbow, in other words, you're taking this lock out your elbow there, what's really happening there is two things. Firstly, you're going to get string clearance, so you're not going to be hitting your arm. Secondly, what's happening there, the elbow starts to act a bit like a shock absorber. A lot of that energy is lost and dissipated through the elbow, and the bow feels a lot smoother to shoot. It's not so aggressive. Do you see what I'm saying? Because a lot of the energy gets soaked up. So I would strongly advise this bow arm position, okay, instead of pushing it forward and locking it out, just let it come back to you and just relax it slightly. Obviously, don't let it collapse, because it's a distance between here and here that gives you your speed. What I'm really trying to say to you guys is push your arm forward as much as you can, but not to a point where you feel this elbow starting to lock out. You know, keep it slightly relaxed is what you want there. All right, so that's your bow arm taken care of. Now, for today, most quality coaches, once they start teaching you, they'll probably start on 3 fingers under in terms of where your placement goes on the fingers here. Normally it's about 3 fingers under, because it's an easier way of shooting a bow. However, it's not ideal. It's not the way you'd want to progress to. You really want to change to a split finger release, which is, Andrew, you already got a split finger release? Yeah, most guys probably have. They've done a few lessons. I would certainly get you shooting with a split finger release as quick as I could. But, I mean, certainly Dad can go with a split finger release if he's very good at it. You two boys today, probably I'd recommend shoot 300 to start with, because you will simply find it, not so problematic. It's an easier way of drawing the bow. But ultimately, I don't mind. We'll see how you get on. I'll let you work it out. 3 fingers, I would advise, just underneath the arrow. Holding the bow in front of you, okay? All you're going to simply start to do now is draw the bowstring back, nice and gently. Just start drawing this bowstring back. Now, as soon as I picked up the bowstring, just be aware of this shoulder, my forearm and my hand all stay in a nice straight line with the arrow, okay? Maintain that right the way through the drawing process. So as you start to draw back, this is all staying in a nice straight line, okay? Don't let any of the back part of the shot start collapsing. A lot of young girls and a lot of youngsters that shoot, as they start to draw, you see firstly, they tend to collapse at the hips, that caves in. The next thing they start doing is pulling back, shoulder blade collapses, elbows collapse, and they end up looking more like this sort of thing. And I'm always saying, straighten your hips up, bring your shoulders up. If you are not, if you're allowing this side to start collapsing, all you're really doing now is pulling with your muscles in your arms, okay, which you should not be using anyway, okay. The muscles in your shoulders are they're very light, okay. All these shoulder muscles are doing really is just holding the bow up. All the pulling, all the work is done through these muscles in your back. These ones down here, they're the ones that do all the pulling, and they're the muscles you should be using, okay. Now, as soon as you keep this elbow up and you start to draw through, and you'll get to about this point here, you will find that all those muscles in your back start doing the work, okay? And they're the muscles you should be using. Your shoulder blades stay fairly relaxed. So, you start to draw back, okay? Pull, just keep pulling, keep pulling, keep pulling, keep pulling, and stop. Now, you can see that I've drawn right the way back, and my fingers are tucked in nice and tight to the corner of my lip. Now, Dad would have been underneath here. With target archers, as I said, their anchor point. What we're talking about here is your anchor point. Now, the anchor point, without doubt, is probably the most important thing you could do in an archery shot. I would say probably the second most important thing that you could have in an archery shot. It's absolutely integral that you have a solid anchor point that you always pull to. Where that anchor point is for you as an individual can vary depending on what bow and what conditions you're shooting under. As I just said, a target archer typically will be underneath the chin. A bow hunter will probably be more up here on the side of his face, okay? And I would argue that you want to anchor just there about the corner of your lip. Now, why do you want to anchor there at the corner of your lip? The anchor point is very important because it does lots of different things. It maintains consistency in you, it maintains consistency in the bow. Most importantly, you have to understand your anchor point is your rear gun sight. So if there's any inconsistencies, if you are drawing this bow back and one time you're a little bit low or you're a little bit high, if this is moving up and down, the arrows are going to move up and down the target. So you need to take your time and work on this anchor point to make sure it's consistent as you possibly can make it. I would recommend, if you want a bow hunting type of shooting, anchor about there. Predominantly, if you feel just a bit of pressure against your tooth, this is called your eye tooth, okay? All our faces are slightly different. We all have one thing in common. If you look in a mirror at your beautiful faces, okay, and look at the pupil of your eye and draw a perfect line down, it will come to about the corner of your lip. Which basically means if you are anchoring just there at the corner of your lip, on that eye tooth, you can feel that bony landmark, okay? You are putting the back of the arrow, the knock, directly in line with the pupil of your eye, which means that arrow is naturally pointing where you're looking, okay? So that's why I would say anchor. I mean, Dad's got glasses on, and if he was to overdraw, if he gets to his anchor point and he starts overextending, then obviously he's running the risk the string catching his glasses and stuff like that. And there's no need to overdraw. You're all quite long in the arm, so you don't need to start overexpanding yourself. Take your time, anchor just there at the corner of your lip. So you're going to draw back, okay? Don't have a death grip on the bow here. Keep your bow arm fairly relaxed. You draw back, nice straight line to that nice solid anchor point at the corner of your face. Now, just hold it there for a moment. Don't rush your shot. Feel what's going on in the shot. If you can, I know there's a lot to think about here, when you hit this anchor point, just keep a little bit of pull going in those back muscles. This is called expansion, okay? You hit your anchor point, most guys actually draw and then they stop pulling. They're just holding the draw weight of the bow. That's actually a mistake. Draw back, hit your anchor point and keep that expansion phase going. When I say expanding, I'm not talking about coming back further on your face. Your anchor point is written in stone. That doesn't move. But in your back muscles, you are aware that you are still slightly keeping that pulling process going is what I'm talking about there. Okay? Now, coming away from technique here just a little bit, let me talk about aiming. There are several different ways that you can aim with a bow. All of them work. Some of them are better than others, and really when it comes to aiming, it just depends on what environment you're shooting in and what you're trying to achieve. A target archer is going to stick a set of sights on his bow. It's the obvious thing to be doing, okay? How well would a set of sights on a bow be if you was in the woods trying to feed your family? Probably not that good, okay? For this main reason, you have to understand a set of sights on a bow is a system. You are using a mathematical system of aiming, and any system that you might incorporate to aiming, and it doesn't matter what it is, it can be a rifle, cannon, anti-tank weapon, bow and arrow, all of them rely ultimately on one thing, and that is knowing how far away the target is. So Dad, if he was going to go out with his bow and he was going to put sights on it and he saw a deer that he wanted to shoot for dinner, he would have to know how far away that deer is before he actually made the shot. So really what we're talking about there is his ability to judge distance to a target. Because I don't know about you guys, I've never seen a deer jump out with 35 yards stamped on its arse, okay? It doesn't happen. So he's got to go into the woods and he's got to say, well, is it 30 yards or is it 40 yards away? Now the truth is, if he overestimates distance or underestimates the distance of the target, it doesn't matter how expensive his bow is and it doesn't matter how good he is at taking the shot, he's going to miss because he's simply got the distance wrong, okay? So it all depends on knowing distance. Now, let's talk about aiming for you guys. Today, there's two methods that I want you to play around with. Probably the one you're going to want to use because it's pretty basic, it works very well, and you'll probably shoot very well with it. It's called point of aim, okay? What that basically means, you're going to do everything I said in terms of your shot. You're going to draw back to your anchor point, okay? And then you're going to close your left eye. And you are going to look at the tip of the arrow for a right-handed archer. You're going to draw back, close your left eye, and you're going to look at the tip of the arrow. And you are going to place the tip of the arrow on what we call a point of aim, depending on distance being shot. Now, your reference point is going to be about there. With this bow, at that distance, you would want to put the tip of the arrow about there in order to hit that. A lot of people that start using point of aim, or think about it, don't quite realise you have to be very careful sometimes. Most people tend to put the tip of the arrow on intended target. And if you do that at this distance, the arrow is going to go clean over the top, okay? You need to understand you have line of sight. Your eyes are looking at the target, but the arrow is not at eye level, okay? And you don't always take that into consideration. So there's a natural triangle from the target to your eyes and the arrow, there's this triangle going on. And obviously it's exaggerated the further back you go. So what you have to understand is there's a reference point on that target that would give this arrow the trajectory it needs to have in order to hit the goal. You just need to know where that reference point is. And I can guarantee it's going to be about the bottom of that target for most people, okay? So what you'll do is you would draw back, hold it nice and steady, put the tip of the arrow on that reference point, control your breathing there a little bit, and then just simply run the shot, okay? That's one very good way of aiming. Now the other way of aiming, guys, just move up a little bit if you would. The other way of aiming, which is the way I shoot the bow, is known as instinctive archery, okay? Now, instinctive archery is the one that's completely out there on its own. And the reason I say that is simply for this reason. It's not a system. It's the only one really that isn't a system. Instinctive archery works on the principle of hand-eye coordination, okay? Now, your brain is a very, very sophisticated computer. What it does is you draw back. If you're shooting an instinctive shot, you're going to draw back, okay? Keep both eyes open. You're just going to simply look along the arrow, line the arrow up with the target, and you're going to say to yourself, I reckon it's about there. And simply let the string just slip from. Don't think about the release too much, just let it happen. It's a bit of a feeling. Your instincts are saying to you, it's about there, and then you simply run the shot. Now, it's not quite as simple as that, but you know, once you get the hang of it, that's how, technically that's how it's working. Now, again, your brain's a very sophisticated computer, so what you will probably end up doing is looking along your arrow, lining things up, getting a feel for where it's going to go, and then you're going to run the shot. Now you have to remember, okay, the arrow's in line with your eye, so generally it's in the right direction, but what the brain doesn't generally account for is the fact that the arrow is 3 inches underneath your eye. So most people, even learning to shoot instinctively, will tend to shoot too high because their line of sight is looking at the target. But the fact is, the arrow isn't up here, it's down here. So generally most people take that shot and tend to shoot too high as a result of it. So, if you're going to shoot instinctively, what I want you to do is concentrate on this focal point. It's not a reference point, it's a focal point. You are just focusing on this area, and as a result of that, you'll probably find that the arrows are going somewhere around the goal there. Okay, now, if you're shooting point of aim, it's a reference point. If you're shooting instinctively, it's just a focal point, really. You're just concentrating on this area. Now, your next question to me is probably going to be, okay, Lee, you know, it makes sense, I understand what you're saying, but does that mean then whenever I take an instinctive shot, I'm always concentrating about 12 to 14 inches underneath the target? No, it doesn't. What you have to understand is this reference, or this focal point, is just there in the short term to teach your brain the flight path the arrow actually takes at that distance to hit this target. Your brain is very clever. Through repetition, it will see the flight path and it will start learning it quite quickly. And I can absolutely guarantee you that this reference point, or focal point, whatever you want, will pay no reference. You'll completely ignore it. You'll look here, just as I did, and pretty much that's where the arrow will go. Hand-eye coordination will start to work, okay? And I can guarantee you that's what will happen now. Now, there's some big advantages to be had by shooting instinctively. Again, depending on what you intend to do with the bow. For an instinctive archer to go out hunting, probably the best way you could shoot. A few reasons, I won't go through them all because we haven't got time for it, but just a few important ones. Firstly, an instinctive archer can generally shoot much quicker than anyone else because he hasn't got to start worrying about how far away the target is. You don't need to know how far away the target is because you're not shooting to a reference point. It's done through hand-eye coordination. So generally you can shoot quite quickly, okay? The other thing about instinctive archery is, I would say, without a doubt, if you want to shoot something that's actually running or moving in some direction, you'd want to do it instinctively. To try and do it with a reference point is too time consuming and too unpredictable. I wouldn't try it, okay? It's going to be like, you know, something moves across the front of you, you're going to draw, give it some lead and you'll just run the shot. With practice, you can get very good at it, shooting moving targets. And last thing about instinctive archery, it's very universal. What I mean by that is if you are shooting to a system, you are buttoned down to a set of rules. It's this archer with those arrows, this bow, under these conditions, okay? If anything changes, Dad can sit down and work out what all his reference points are, what all his sight settings are for the next 2 weeks. If I come along and take those arrows away from him and give him a different set of arrows, there's a very good chance you're going to have to recalibrate everything, okay? With instinctive archery, you don't have to. This is not my bow, okay? My bow's that American flat bow in there that I use. This is one of the company bows, and that wasn't a half bad shot, if I do say so myself. Why? It's simply because I can pretty much pick a bow up quite quickly and see arrow fly it, and you will do, okay? With that arrow, I was a little bit to the left, okay? I was still in the goal, a little bit left, maybe a tad high. All I'm simply going to do when you're shooting instinctively is, okay, I'm shooting a little bit, I need to be a teeny bit more to the right, and you just make a small adjustment, and before you know it, you're away with it. Play around with this bow for any length of time, and you're going to get pretty good with it. Hand-eye coordination will start working for you. So, what I'm saying now is you are open, you can play with pretty much any bows. I mean, I wouldn't advise that, to be honest with you. Stick with one bow. But generally, you can pick up most bows, and within a fairly short time, you'll probably shoot them quite well. Okay, so that's how instinctive archery works. You tell me what you want to do. If you say, Lee, I'd like to have a go at instinctive, then we'll talk you through it. If you want to use point of aim, we'll talk you through that and help you out. Just turn the lights on, let's get a bit done now. So, that's what you're going to do there. Now, that's aiming. You understand how aiming works. Now, guys, let me just highlight this because it's very important. A lot of people do get confused. You know, they think aiming is all part of shooting a bow, and it's, look, listen, shooting a bow is shooting a bow, and aiming with a bow, they're two separate things entirely, okay? What I mean by that is this. Obviously, you can't have one without the other. If you want to be good with your bow, you need to know where you're aiming with it. But you have to understand, you will never, ever learn where to aim with a bow until you've mastered the art of shooting a bow. So we're talking about technique. And that applies to all aiming. It doesn't matter whether you're shooting a rifle, anti-tank weapon, handgun, or anything else. You have to have consistency. All aiming depends on consistency. If you are not being consistent, you're aiming, you're shooting away there, and the arrows are going to go all over the place. And eventually, if your brain could talk to you, it would say, listen, Andrew, I can't tell you where to aim because you're not doing the same thing in any one shot. The minute you start becoming consistent through a good technique, the arrows are going to start grouping. And the more consistent you're being, I might add, the tighter the arrows are going to group. The tighter the arrows group, the more obvious it is for you to adjust to get them onto target. So it's all about this stage, it's all about consistency of the shot, okay? And aiming will probably look after itself. Now, let me just get back to technique. So, we've drawn back, you're keeping a little bit of pull in your back muscles, and then the release takes place. Now, guys, The release is quite a complex thing. I'm not going to go into it in detail today. What I'd probably say to you at this stage is the less you think about the release, probably the better it's going to be, okay? Just draw back. When you feel like it's ready to happen, just relax it and let it go, okay? So don't think about the release too much. What I do want you to think about, because in my opinion, this is the most important part of an archery shot, okay? This is the thing that you're thinking about. At the time of releasing, you must concentrate on keeping your bow arm as steady as you possibly can through the shot. This is called following through, okay? You've got to understand that when you're back here, okay, and you've got energy in your hands, for every action, there is an opposite and equal reaction. If you are holding 30 pounds of energy back here and you let it go, this bow is actively going to try and push your arm forward and away from the target. That's the energy coming off the bow. If I draw this bow back without actually holding on to it and I let go now, the arrow will go forward and so will the bow, and obviously the whole lot will go shooting across the floor. That energy is going into your bow hand, okay? That's why you mustn't have a death grip on it, because you're going to fight with this thing. The bow's sort of pushing your arm forward. What you've got to learn to do is release that energy and keep this arm as steady as you can through the shot. Because obviously, it's not a bullet moving at 2,500 feet per second, it's moving pretty fast, but it isn't moving that fast. And when this arrow comes off this string, okay, depending on where this bow's moving, at the time of the arrow running across that shaft, depends on where the arrow's going to end up. And if you can keep your bow arm nice and steady through the shot, in other words, you don't move anything until the arrow actually hits the target, you're probably going to be shooting very well. A lot of people for many years go on at me about, oh, my release isn't very good, I've got to work on my release. 90% of bad archery, you can have a guy actually that hasn't got a particularly good release. But if he's got a really good follow, that he keeps his bow arm steady through the shot, you tend to find they actually shoot very well. I mean, the release is a fundamental part of it, don't get me wrong, but I would say it's probably more important to follow through than have a fantastic release. It's best to have both, obviously, but you know, the follow through really makes the shot happen. Doesn't matter how good the release is, this arm's wobbling around as you take the shot, it's done deal, you're going to miss, okay? So keep that arm nice and steady. Now, the last thing I want to cover here is this. When you take an archery shot, it's really important, okay, your shoulders are relaxed, but you have correct, proper shoulder alignment through your body. Now what I mean by that is this. When I draw a bow up in front of you, obviously without an arrow on it here, I want you to look through my shoulders, okay? And you should see, certainly this elbow here, disappearing out of sight behind my head. So I'm going to draw back, okay, to the ankle point, and you should see now, pretty much, that elbow, everything's out of sight. See that nice straight line? You can't, I'm not looking up, you can see my elbow, everything's, you know, rounded, shoulders all off in some weird direction. You want that nice straight line running through your shoulders. Now, if we all agree that when you take an archery shot, that's the position you want to be in, okay? And it is, all I've got to do now is get the string back, agreed? If I stay in this position, what you're doing is you're pushing these shoulder blades slightly together, so you've got that nice straight line. All I need to do is get the string back. You won't be able to, okay? Because there's no flex. What you'll find yourself doing, in order for you to come forward and pick the string up there, you're doing a straight draw as I am here, you'll probably slightly twist at your hips, just a little bit there, and this shoulder blade is going to go off in that direction. It has to, because you can't reach the string otherwise. Now, this is really important. As you start drawing, you need to rotate, you need to straighten those hips and straighten those shoulders up. I'll show you what I'm talking about so you can see it sort of in slow motion here. Okay, don't make a video and stop selling that, will you? As you start to draw back, okay, just watch me. You see this shoulder blade's gone off, my hips are slightly twisted. You start to draw, now watch me slowly. My hips come back round, my shoulder blade's coming back in, that's good enough. Continue to draw through, and you're going to look very nice and feel very comfortable and feel like you've got a lot of power coming into things. Don't push into your shoulders. I don't want to see you doing this. Look at that, you see the big bulge? A lot of guys end up looking like this. A nice forward, relaxed shoulder is what you want. Hit your ankle point, keep a bit of pull in the back muscles. There it is, and then just simply let the release happen, okay? It's very important that you bring those hips and shoulders round, because simply if you don't, this is what's going to happen. And if you ever start getting your girlfriend to shoot a bow, she's not going to be impressed with you, because she may end up looking like this. If I come forward to pick the string up, okay, and I don't straighten myself up as I start to draw, you're going to end up looking more like that. and you can see what could happen, especially if you was a lady, because thank the Lord, ladies are built different to guys. And if she catches herself there, you are not going to be the flavour of the month, okay? It's very important you bring those hips and shoulders around, and you can see instantly the difference. The string is way out there in front of you, and there's no chance of a lady catching her busting anyway, and that's very important, okay? And again, as I said, even a guy can catch himself. It's not very pleasant if you do. That's why a lot of target blokes wear these chest guards. You know, you don't need them, but that's why they wear them, okay? For other reasons as well. So, everything's nice and straight. You draw back, nice straight line for your shoulders, keep a bit of pull going through the back muscles, you say to yourself, there it is, and simply just let the shot run, okay? Quite involved. I don't know if that's more involved than what they've been teaching, probably will be, because as I said, we teach on a professional basis up here. We teach target as well as field. What I'm going to do now, guys, there's an awful lot that's gone into that, okay? You might be thinking, Jesus, you know, I come up with a bit of fun, I'm not going to remember all that. I wouldn't expect you to. Dad's got it on video, so you can always sort of re-look at it and think, okay, what's he going on about? Oh, it's quite good to, if it comes, you know, you can re-study it if you like. What we're going to do now, obviously, is get a bow in your hands where you can start to feel and appreciate what I'm talking about there, okay? And hopefully get you shooting very well. Because ultimately, it's about a feeling. It's understanding how the shot should feel, and that's really when it starts coming together. So let's get some bows and let's get you guys going.
Can you just run over the hand grip again?
Yeah, the hand grip. Okay, guys, there are different hand positions you can adopt on a bow. A target archer will generally, sorry, hold that for me, will have a very high wrist grip. They tend to put their, you know, there's not a lot of pressure there. The hand goes in there, and they normally have their hand at a sort of 45 degrees, and they'll hold the bow more like that, okay? Also with target archers, they'll have a bow sling. I don't know if Andrew's got one. It should, yeah, normally they'll have a bow sling around here and it's connected to the bow. And you've seen them, I don't know if you've seen the Olympics, when you see these target archers shoot, they'll draw back, they run the shot, and quite often the bow tips forward in the hand, or, you know, some of the Korean shooters, as they shoot, you'll actually see the bow come almost backwards. That's just part of their follow through, and it's the way you shoot a target bow. But there are different hand positions. You don't really want to adopt a very high wrist grip, which is what most target archers have, okay, shooting a traditional bow. There you can have a high wrist grip, which I wouldn't advise it, unless you've got a bow sling on there. You can have a medium wrist grip, which is the way I shoot, okay. What I do, instead of having, you know, the whole bow in the hand there, I pull the hand away slightly, so the lifeline is coming out the bow. It's a bit like a target archer, but not the same, okay, and I'm just cupping those fingers around the front of the bow. So predominantly, the whole of the hand's not right into the bow, it's just sort of half of it, okay? And the bow reaction in the hand tends to work a bit better, I think anyway. Or you can indeed have a very low wrist grip if you wish that, you know, it's all personal stuff this, which is really where you're holding the entire bow. You know, none of them are bad, it's what suits you. This is where your own style of shooting should develop, you know. I wouldn't say, oh, you must do it this way, because I do, it's what suits you. The only thing I would say is don't have the bow in some sort of death vice. You don't need to. A lot of guys, you see all their hands going white. I've even had some guys come back to me saying, oh Lee, I'm getting some sort of, you know, indentation. It's because they're holding everything so tight. You know, if I draw this bow back, you'll see that side of the hand, okay, it's pretty relaxed. I'm drawing it back, and all I'm doing really there is just cupping those fingers around. So you don't need some sort of death grip going there in the hand. Right, let's get some bows in your hands. Dad, we're going to